Hello, everyone from GCEGlobal. My name is Sebastian, and we're broadcasting today from London, from the UK. And we have a very, very special guest in today's show, someone I've known for quite some time who's going to talk about data privacy and also some of his experience on this matter, which you might find important for your own company and corporation, for your own law firm or accounting firm. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Justin BUDD. He's a graduate from University of Pittsburgh, and he has a background in computer science. Justin, hello. Thanks for coming to the show, and we're really, really honored to have you here.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
So just talk a little bit about your background, and we're all interested to understand, why you major in computer science and what's that background that you have had so far in your professional career.
Yeah, so, whenever I got started in college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but at some point along the way, I realized really the power that's in a keyboard nowadays. And I really just found that really attractive. And that really started me down a journey of learning, how to take advantage of technology in the future. And that really got me excited into computer science and cybersecurity more specifically. And I started working to learn as much as I can.
Interesting. What are some of the things, some of the fields on that, in that same regard you've been working on?
Yeah, so I really started in intelligence on specifically cyber intelligence. So really collecting on open source data and finding information that's relevant to people. There's so much data out there, so many websites. I mean, we could never explore them all, but being able to identify what is relevant to a specific person or individual can really be very beneficial, as far as brand protection, identifying threats, really the applications are really endless. So I started in really in cyber intelligence, got me really interested in data privacy, because once you really start to see how much information is out there on everybody and how much information people are willing to put out there, it can scare you a little bit and certainly make you think twice before you really put yourself out there. And these are things that most people don't think about. So it became a passion of mine, spreading that awareness so that people know what they're putting out there and can make those decisions a little bit more informed.
So let's rewind a little bit here, because I'm sure a lot of people were watching or will watch this video in the future do not understand what data privacy means and why it is so important. So would you further elaborate on this for us? Why is data privacy so important and what it actually is?
Yes, so data privacy, it can often get confused with data security. And privacy is more so of that controlling of who sees information. So data security is really that protection side of limiting unauthorized users. But where data privacy comes into play is you authorize people to collect or process data. And the question is, how do they use that data? So big tech companies, social media, Google, they're all collecting vast amount of data and information on people. And the question is, how are they using it? A lot of these companies nowadays, they sell a lot of data to data brokers or use it to have more targeting advertising. So, some of the uses of data can be bad, but not all of it is. Some people really like the conveniences that come with companies leveraging more data. For example, you can have there's times where you're on Amazon and it knows what you want before you do. Some people really like that feature. Other people get really freaked out by it. So that's where that data privacy aspect is really, how is your data being used, and did you really consent and understand to that use?
Okay, so I think based on what you're saying, I have two big questions there. The first one being, what's, what type of information are companies collecting on people normally? That's the first one. And then the second one would be, a lot of us, a lot of the times, just don't even read terms and conditions, and we just, click accept and we're ready to go. And as you say, it's very convenient because, for instance, we can link our Google account to so many things and just, don't even have to log in anymore. So on that regard, the second question would be, what are some of the terms and conditions that we don't really read and that we're consenting to sometimes?
Absolutely. So as far as your first question, what kind of data points are being collected, it really depends on who's doing the collection. Some companies are very targeted as to what it is that you like, certain products, what you're buying. Google Maps, for example, wants to know where you're going. And sometimes, more often on its face, on that surface level, it can be to improve the maps, which is beneficial to all of us. We love being able to, bring up a new location that we've never been on our phone and have our phone take us there in the quickest way possible. And Google collecting map data can really, help that process out for all of us. But they can also be collecting information at all times of the day when you really don't want them to. You turn off the location services on your phone and you think that you're not sharing that data anymore, and that's not the case. So as far as what data is being collected, some of the larger data brokers, they're collecting over 1,500 data points on people, everything from your name, age, sex, location, your relatives, where you've lived for your entire life. So not even just where you're at right now. Sometimes they have more information than you think you even know about yourself or can remember. Can you remember the 4 places, the exact address 4 locations ago, where you lived? There's data brokers out there that have all that. They'll have pictures of your house. So it's, what is being collected is really vast. Even medical records, which we all think, depending on where you're at in the world, is private, is often not the case. That data is being sold and shared. You even have Facebook has gotten in trouble nearly every year for some various form of breaching the trust of their data ownership and privacy. It's even identified that they held shadow accounts for people. So, for example, people who had never signed up for Facebook, there was a profile out there on them. And, that's just so that they can collect and build a profile. And as far as your second question, and what data is, is being used.
Yeah, it was more towards what terms and conditions we consider when we hit accept, and we really don't know what we're doing, but we just think it's okay.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's one of the things that people are starting to wake up to. But often you do consent to sharing your data. For example, if you open up Outlook, for example, you're sharing all of your information. Every email that comes through your Outlook is being viewed by Microsoft, or at least it goes through their servers at one point. For example, if you you hit those terms and conditions for your antivirus, you are consenting for a third party to scan everything that comes in and goes out of your computer. And that's that big thing is that really there are almost no limitations as to what it is that you might be agreeing to or not agreeing to. And I know it's really hard to go through those terms and conditions because,
you almost need to have a lawyer on speed dial to understand those.
you really do, and that's one of those things that I think people are starting to wake up to, and they're starting to, value their privacy a little bit more. And I would certainly encourage everybody to, be aware of those things, and honestly to make your government representatives aware of those things, because it's our responsibility to hold tech companies responsible. They're trying to run a business, and if we just blindly accept what they're offering, that's on us.
That's correct. Well, what you're watching on the screen right now is Justin's social media, my social media. We're just in case you're interested in learning more about data privacy, you can go ahead and contact Justin at JTBot1. Justin, let's focus a little bit more on companies and corporations. How are companies and corporations nowadays being affected by data privacy, matters? And then I want to emphasize that if we thought last year or the year before companies were affected, this year they're actually being highly or significantly affected by this just because of COVID. And I don't want to get into COVID, just making that point there, that everyone now started working from home, everyone. So I just want to ask on that regard, how are they being affected by data privacy, matters nowadays?
Absolutely. And, it's endless. It always helps to think from the perspective of the bad guys out there. Ultimately, companies and individuals are constantly under attack from cyber criminals. And, the criminals out there have realized that the companies are the ones with more to offer, more benefits to reap. And there are so many companies out there that don't have a strong security posture. So, it helps to think in terms of those bad guys. They're looking for any sort of data points to identify, especially in the open source field, which is, your Facebook, your social medias, your blogs, news pages. They're looking for anything that can help them to break into a network. We're seeing really a rise. There's a constant growth in the number of phishing attacks that are happening, and that's when a bad guy will send out an email directed at a company, and they can send it to everybody. And oftentimes it includes just a link or something to click on that will grant them access. And the idea is that the more data that's available, if it's known that John Smith works at your company, they'll write an email to another coworker and saying, hey, this is John Smith. Can you just sign this policy for me and send it back? And it's a clickable link that's presented as a PDF. And they think that it's from another person within their company. And before you know it, your entire network could be compromised. So having that data out there really makes it easier for the bad guys.
Actually, I do have a question from someone from our audience here. They want to know, is it imperative for law and accounting firms nowadays to have IT departments for these matters, and why?
I think it really depends on the companies as and individuals. But ultimately, I would highly recommend that anybody who is taking control of PII, personally identifiable information, so that could be clients' names, for example, in terms of law firms, and specific details that have to remain private. And especially for lawyers, that's especially important. One of my friends who's a lawyer, he said it's at least in America that's the strongest privacy that you can get. You have more privacy between you and your lawyer than you do between you and your therapist.
Having said that, if the phone is not in the room, right?
I guess it depends where you're at, like I said. But for these guys that are, like I said, they're taking control of data and they have really valuable information to protect. I would highly recommend for them to at least get an IT consultant, somebody that, depending on the size of the firm, they should at least get somebody to take an analysis of how their workflow operates and where they control their data. Do they have backups? Do they have a recovery plan? And these are all things that an IT consultant really can help you with. Especially in terms of backups, we are seeing a rise in these attacks where people are breaking into networks and then they are encrypting all the data that you have. So, for example, if a law firm, if all of their data was encrypted and they couldn't access it anymore, there's this demand for this a ransom. That's why they call it ransomware attack. And it's give me this much in Bitcoin, or you'll lose your data forever. And to be honest with you, you don't even know if you pay the ransom if you're going to get your data back. And that could really not only be destructive to current efforts and cases, destroying historical data, but it's also very dangerous in terms of ruining your reputation. If you're not trusted with data, who's going to come to you?
Right. So you just mentioned something very important here, and I wanted to ask, you mentioned PII.
Mm-hmm.
First, can you please further elaborate for us on what's PII? And second, I kind of have a sense of what's PII. Maybe someone who's watching does not. But is this why we can't really find you on social media ever?
It's I have certainly tried to minimize my footprint, and that's one of those challenges that businesses face. But I can get more into that. But to answer your question, PII is personally identifiable information. So it is any data that can be used to specifically associate to one individual. So that can be your birthday, your address, your credit card number, social security number if you're in America, or any specific other identification numbers granted by the governments of any other countries. So it's any data that is just specifically connected to a person. That's really, in today's world of data, that's really growing, and we're getting a lot more of that. And that's what makes it more challenging, again, in terms of people being able to steal your identity. If you apply for a loan, you have to put your social security number out there, your address, all these things. And then we don't know what happens whenever, for example, if you're going for that loan, you hand over all this information, and then we don't know what happens on the back end. So it's out of your control. And that's
So in that same regard, what are some of the common things corporations do nowadays in which they're releasing a lot of information, a lot of, private information, and they are not even realizing? What are some of those things that they do in which they share that information, or even individuals, and they don't realize?
So as far as sharing accidentally, you constantly, again, you have these criminals out there who are looking for a way into your network. So that's the most surface level way that people are gathering data. Networks may even be breached, and companies might not even be aware of it for years at times, where information is just being collected. Beyond that, you can look at, if networks aren't configured properly, you also increase your exposure. And that's where really having an IT, at least a consultant or a dedicated IT team can really help protect that information. Also, you just have regular user level mistakes. You'll have companies that think that, it's okay for me to send confidential information, for example, or controlled information that, nobody's targeting us. So it's okay for us to send this and to sort of skip some security procedures. And that is an incredibly dangerous train of thought, so you have to always be playing it safe. You have to always be looking out, and, you can't be skipping those steps, because data leaks do happen, and they can be incredibly destructive.
Justin, hearing you talk about data leaks, brings me to a next level of question, which is not so digital. It's more so. I was thinking there are data leaks when employees just decide to take pictures at work, and there is information hanging on the back. How should companies approach this? Should they have a policy of employees not taking pictures, at work, or is this invading their, privacy, telling a worker, hey, you can't take a picture here? well, how would you go about that? How would you advise companies on this? Because they're not really. Well, I guess it is related to the digital world, but what I'm saying is that information is not being released. It's normally through pictures that are being posted. So how should a company approach this?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. I would highly encourage that companies, ultimately, they have to be training their staff. People don't think that what they're doing is a big deal. Oftentimes, data leaks or even security breaches happen totally by accident. Most employees aren't out there trying to cause damage to their company, but they may be doing so accidentally. So that's where it's really important for companies to be training their staff. The biggest security vulnerability is to a company is oftentimes between the keyboard and the chair, as one of my bosses said. And so that's where it really does help to educate them. Control social media. Limit those things in the workplace. That's those times that a company will oftentimes have a dedicated social media staff, and beyond that, nothing should be going from work to social media. I mean, that's just a good practice. So educate staff, teach them about proper passwords and safety, teach them about safe social media uses that, and it should be clearly established in a policy as well that part of your agreement with your staff is certain policies like that. So
I do actually have another question for you here from someone from our audience. They're asking, what are some techniques, or what could be some ways in which we could, avoid giving our information to companies?
Yes. So first of all is to have a strong security posture. That's always that would always be the first thing, is that networks have to be configured properly. Otherwise, you're always leaving yourself vulnerable to those cyber criminals out there. And that's, again, where an IT consultant can really come into play and be very helpful. Beyond that, again, is really teaching your staff as far as, I've seen people putting their passwords on Post-it notes right in front of their computer, that can easily lead to a major data breach. Having clear policies as to how you share information and what channels you use. So whether it's classified or unclassified data, controlled information, there needs to be a procedure. Also, like I said before, one of the biggest things attacking companies nowadays are these phishing attacks. So you can implement simple things like having a company-wide consistent signature at the bottom that just includes the company logo and the names, and a simple format like that can really go a long way. That if you don't see that at the bottom, then that this email did not come internally, and that can really prevent you from having data leaks. So, I just reinforce that having a strong security posture and proper training for the staff is really the best way to prevent data leaks.
So I want to ask you in this same regard, it's not only about having that policy, but also how you execute it, I guess. And on that same aspect, I want to ask you, what are some of the other things that we could do to prevent, in terms of, it's not always that we accept terms and conditions that we're given information, but a lot of the times the institutions we belong to, or our banks, etc., they have leaks. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times I've heard people that they come to me and they're like, well, I had the same password on all my 50 accounts, social media accounts, emails, and so with one password I got hacked. So why don't you talk to us a little bit more about, maybe a password manager, maybe a virtual network protection? What are those things that companies can also implement, and individuals when it comes to data privacy?
Absolutely, and I think this can also tie in a little bit back to your previous question about what companies can do. So, having a password manager is huge. You can go from everybody using an 8-character password that can be brute forced in under 3 minutes to having 30+ character passwords that takes 2 to the 23rd years to hack. So password managers are huge. I would highly encourage not only for companies to use them, but for individuals in their personal life to use them as well. They're great tools. One thing that you can do as far as one of the vulnerabilities that a password manager does present is oftentimes that if the password manager itself is compromised, everything else is compromised. So one thing you can do, for example, is if you have a password manager that has, let's just say, 25 characters in your password, you can add consistently something to the end of it, like a number or an additional phrase that you never put into the password manager. So for example, if in the manager you have stored in there password 1, password 2, password 3, you would know to add to the end of all those whenever you go to use them, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, obviously, I highly recommend not using those types of passwords, but hopefully that conveys that idea that you just take a little bit of something and you can tack it on to the end there. Another thing that I would recommend to companies is to practice minimalism. Minimize the amount of software that you make available on your networks. That will also minimize the data exposures that come from third-party applications and software. And be sure to keep those things up to date as well. It's a common thing I see is that, and it's honestly one of the biggest security vulnerabilities. Again, is that systems aren't kept up to date, software isn't kept up to date. Those patches come through often fix security problems, and if people don't address those, then you're leaving your company vulnerable.
Well, that sounds like a good practice. Good thing to execute in companies, especially if you're a law and accounting firm. You have a lot of client information, personal information. Especially accounting firms that have accounting softwares. And putting these things in place is really helpful. I do have a question from another person who's watching us, and it does relate to something we talked about at the beginning. So it doesn't really, maybe it doesn't relate to the last question, but I still want to ask it because I now have the same question, and it is, you mentioned the difference between data privacy and data security. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between data privacy and data security?
So, like I said, data security is really the methods that you use to protect your network, and data security is really preventing unauthorized users from accessing your data. Whereas data privacy is how is data being used by people that you have authorized to process it. So, for example, when we talk about data security, you're talking about firewalls, VPNs, which maybe I missed to mention earlier. That's a virtual private network. It's something that, again, I would highly recommend for not only for businesses to use, but also for individuals to use. That encrypts your data so that whenever it's traveling over a network, it's intangible. You can't understand it. As far as for example, if you were at the airport using your company laptop and you were transferring a document, that document or passwords, for example, people can easily collect data over public networks like that and really collect everything from passwords to communications, pictures, whatever it is that you're transmitting. Whereas with a virtual private network, it's all scrambled and requires effort to decrypt. So those are all things that, in terms of data security, and then data privacy, like I said, is Google telling you what time I wake up in the morning and turn on my lights.
Well, I want everyone to know that a lot of the times I probably have to WhatsApp call Justin. So He really enforces his the data privacy policy, personal policy very well. So I only get a hold of him every now and then, right?
Gotta go through the security gates.
I'm glad you're here with us. So just before moving on to the next topic, which I want to ask you a little bit about blockchain and all of this. We do have some legal firms that are very interested in blockchain, and we even have them, And again, I know this is not your area of expertise per se, but maybe you do have some information we don't. But I want to ask you about, privacy data policies in terms of in terms of legislation. It seems to me like everyone is trying to catch up as we go with legislation everywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. But what's some of the legislation maybe in the United States that or maybe some other places that it's being taken into consideration, but by the institutions, by national institutions, to put in place? And are this good? I mean, in your opinion, are this good? Should we replicate those across the world?
Absolutely. So actually, the United Nations declared that privacy is actually a fundamental human right. So, there are laws out there. Now, the question is, how do you define privacy? Is that just your communications? Is that, when and where you go about places? So it has been recognized as a human right, but it's that definition and enforcement afterwards where it really gets kind of dicey. So there are laws out there. California has some really strict laws as well as far as data privacy goes. And, we're seeing it right now in the United States where, every year now, Google, Facebook, they're all being pulled in front of Congress and, have to address some of the growing concerns as far as, not only how they manage data, but how they manage operating as an online platform or an online forum nowadays. And that's something that, like you said, the legal end is a little bit, behind the ball, but the more people that take an interest in it, the more we can put that to the forefront of, what matters. I was actually really hoping that data privacy was going to be a bigger concern for this upcoming election up here in America, but then COVID hit, and so it's been a little bit more.
Now that you touch upon that, again, I try not to have this subject in the middle of conversations because I feel like people are tired of hearing about it. I myself, but actually, what you just mentioned, first of all, reminds me of our political chats, sometimes back in the day. But second of all, it should be a concern because especially nowadays, as we mentioned earlier, people are working from home, and that means that as I always say, even at work, I say, what you can't measure, you don't control. And so now companies are allowing you to work from home with all their information, corporate information. Mm-hmm. Why do you think this is not relevant? It's obvious that this should be the number one priority, at least for the business world. Why is this not a priority in the political spectrum right now?
Well, that's a great question. Ultimately, I think some of the more jaded answers would be that big tech has invested a lot in maintaining its power and its position. They have a lot of money and they know where to spend it. And politicians receive good chunks of money from a lot of these large tech companies. And all that information, at least in America, is public information. And I would encourage people to be aware of who is funding their representatives and why and how. You see it nowadays that tech companies will hedge their bets and donate to both sides because that way, either way, they have friends. And so when when you're receiving money like that from, as a politician, if you're receiving that money, you don't want to, rock the boat, as they say. You wouldn't want to disturb that, because money really does help win. I think they said it's the person with more money wins like 92% of elections. So at a surface level, I think that's a big reason why. I think another reason why, honestly, is that we don't know really how to address these issues. Tech is so new and it's growing so fast. And I mean, 15 years ago, Facebook wasn't even a thing. Nobody even thought about it. Now it's like, if you want to have a business, you better have a Facebook page.
That makes a lot of sense, of course.
Absolutely. And, government just typically doesn't move that fast, especially in democracies. You have to get everybody to come to mutual agreements, and that's
Right.
That's a challenging thing. But I think that that's something, though, that we can all really agree is important, and we should make important. That unless you would go out and unless you would write down your schedule, your friends, every purchase you made, your medical records, make copies, and hand it out to strangers on the street, then you should be valuing your privacy and making it a priority.
Right. Well, that's correct. I don't want to push you towards the the political arena, because it's probably not very well seen at the corporate either way. So let's just try to move on to the next topic here. Before we wrap it up, and it is why don't we start by asking you, what is cloud computing? I mean, that's something that's really a topic that I hear people talk a lot about at meetings, especially legal firms. And we actually at GCE, we do have a firm that is an IT firm. They do tech support for a lot of the GC holding companies or GC enterprise companies, and they always talk about the cloud and cloud computing. Why is this so important? What is cloud computing? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. And by the way, I do also want to come back to your blockchain question as well, because I know we sort of skipped over that.
Oh no, we'll come to that in a second, actually.
All right. So cloud computing is really where you're taking advantage of offsite resources. Is how I would quickly summarize it. So, where I can maintain, as a company, for example, I can maintain local servers and hard drives that serve up my website, process my company data, store all that data. Cloud computing allows me to push all that off to external resources, which can often be a great fit for companies. Because not only does it, you can take advantage of often more sophisticated technology, but they also you can take advantage of their security posture. For example, if you're using Amazon Web Services, for example, is one of the biggest cloud computing options out there. You can take advantage of the security of Amazon, which is oftentimes going to be a lot better than your mom and pop company. I think one way that I would make it a little bit more relatable or understandable is that, I have a kitchen with, pots, pans, food, everything that I could need to make myself dinner. But I can also call up Uber Eats, and somebody else somewhere will cook for me, they'll clean for me, and they'll deliver back to me what I want. Cloud computing is very similar. I'm asking somebody somewhere else to do all the computing for me, and then they're giving me back what I want.
Well, you just touched upon blockchain, so I have to ask this, because here on my script I have those as comparatively speaking different, but we all want to understand the difference. So why don't we start with, on that same regard, what is blockchain and how does it protect your data privacy?
Yeah, so blockchain is ultimately a way of securing data. It's a decentralized way of processing, storing, and securing data. So it's been most famous nowadays by Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, but that's not its only application. The idea is that basically it's taking advantage of cryptographic and mathematic principles to make it nearly impossible to corrupt data. So I guess I would explain it as, for example, in Bitcoin, and I guess in other applications as well. You would think of there's a public ledger. So we'll just stick with Bitcoin because it's the most common example. But again, it can be applied in many different ways. But for example, there's a public ledger. Everybody has listed out how much Bitcoin they have. So how much Bitcoin you have, I have, your sister has, your dad has. And all that information is included in a public ledger. That information is then distributed to multiple other copies of that same ledger. And the idea is that whenever, for example, if I want to give you Bitcoin, I would initiate a transaction. So I would say that, hey, I want to send you $100 worth of Bitcoin. And then the idea is that all of the other public ledgers would then receive an update of me sending you $100. There's a lot of mathematical work and logic puzzles that take place in the background. And ultimately, all of the public ledgers end up receiving this update. And that's why, for example, everybody can see how much Bitcoin everybody else has. So that primary concept is that it is a decentralized way of securely storing data that is it's pretty mathematically tough to crack.
So just, I mean, we're running out of time here, but I just want to ask you very quick, what's the difference between both that we just talked about?
Yeah, so ultimately they exist. I would say they exist independently. For example, you can take advantage of blockchain technology over cloud computing. One is just a way of processing and securing data, and the other is a way of doing computer work, processing. Bitcoin often, the way that it works requires an extensive amount of computer processing, which you could really offload to cloud computing if you wanted. It'd be pretty expensive, but you could do it. So, like I said, they're just they are pretty independent concepts. I understand nowadays that they both sort of had a rise at the same time. So I could certainly see where people might mesh the two together. But as far as, for example, I know you have a lot of people that view this channel that are lawyers and accountants. I think they'd be interested to know more about, for example, smart contracts and things like that. It's something that it's a way that blockchain takes advantage of, or it's a way that lawyers and contracts are taking advantage of blockchain. I don't know if we have enough time, but certainly if we don't, I would encourage them all to look into smart contracts.
All right. Well, I just wanted to leave some room for you to talk about your personal projects, maybe what you're working on right now, if you want to, or just kind of say what you're looking at here in the future. Maybe kind of finalize with an opinion. I mean, certainly our motto right now is business for the future. So where do you see all this stuff going on, going towards in the future, in the maybe near future? Where do you see all of this going?
Yeah, so for me personally, I want to continue to grow in the security field, and it's a constantly changing landscape. And in the field of computer science, if you're not learning, you're not growing. And honestly, stagnation in the field of computers is dangerous. There are updates and changes happening every day. Like I said, we didn't think of social media 10, 15 years ago. We didn't think of blockchain 5 years ago. At least not largely in the mainstream. So I'm looking to continue to grow there to help not only the companies that I work for, but for all the companies out there to grow more secure. Technology is great, but it also has come with a lot of risks. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, and I want to do everything I can to help myself, my companies, and everybody else out there to stay safe and keep using the internet for the best that it can be. It's really allowed us as a species, honestly, to grow to at an incredible rate. When they landed on the moon, I have more computing power in my pocket than they used to go to the moon. And we just saw SpaceX launch the first private sector ship into orbit. I mean, it's awesome. So I think that we need to do everything we can to be responsible online, to protect ourselves. We have police and armies and governments out there to help protect our freedoms and protect our liberties. But we also have to take personal responsibility and do everything we can to, protect our own online identities, protect our data. I think that's a big thing.
Justin, we have to let you go now, but so I'll give you just a few minutes to say goodbye to our audience here, and want to thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge with everyone. I think we're going to have you at the Global Summit in October. So we hope to see you there. It's going to be a virtual reality global summit. So we hope you attend, and everyone who's watching to hear more about, data privacy, cyber crimes and whatnot. And I want to also tell you there's something you once said to me that I will never forget, and it was, "If it's free, you're the product." So thanks a lot for your knowledge. Thanks a lot for your advice, and this is your time to advertise yourself and say goodbye to our audience.
Absolutely. And, I couldn't help but slide in, with those voice assistants, they're giving them away because you're giving over a whole bunch of data. But no, I appreciate you having me on. Honestly, this has been great. It's been a lot of fun. I love sharing this information. I love helping the world to become more secure online. You guys, you see my website, my handle there. I do maintain a pretty small digital footprint, or at least I try to. But if anybody has more questions or is interested in training for their employees, I love giving these sorts of talks and this sort of training. So anybody feel free to reach out to me. You can also get a hold of me at jbud@buddwebsolutions.com. And like I said, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks for you all who watch this live or who will watch it in the near future. You'll get some great tips out of it. We appreciate your time. This was Justin Bott from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, myself, Sebastian from London, live for GCEGlobal members, the GCEGlobal network. We'll see you in the next live. Thanks.
Thank you.